Are voter ID laws racist? Professor Tolson.
Thank you for that question. So it depends. One thing we have to stop doing is treating all voter ID laws as the same.
Okay, so your answer, I want to move quickly, so it depends is your answer?
Yes, that's my answer.
Okay, so what voter ID laws are racist?
Apologies, Mr. Cruz, your state of Texas, perhaps?
Okay, so you think the entire state of Texas is racist. What about requiring an ID to vote is racist?
So I think, sir, that's pretty reductive. I'm not saying the entire state of Texas is racist.
You just said my state of Texas, so you tell me,
Your
what
voter
about
I-
the Texas voter ID laws is
absolutely.
racist?
So the fact that the voter ID law was put into place to diminish the political power of Latinos with racist intent and had been found to have
You're
racist
asserting that.
intent,
What's your evidence for that?
the federal district court that first resolved the constitutionality of Texas's voter ID law.
Okay, so your view is
So your view is that you believe in some pussy-ass federal judge. Let me tell you something. I'm from Texas, and I don't believe in judges. So get fucked.
voter ID laws are racist. How about you, Mr.
Like, even, you want to know how fucking racist voter ID laws are in the state of Texas specifically? The constitutional defense for it from the legal scholars completely avoids it. They're like, yeah, we know it's racist, but like, is it intentionally racist or not? So like, that's how fucking racist they are. Like, they're like, yeah, the impact of it might be racist, sure, but do we do it on purpose? Oh, can't prove it. No, boo-boo. Can't prove it. Like, they're literally, like, we're past the point of whether they're racist or not. Like, the impact is. Now it's a matter of, like, whether if the impact is racist, does it matter? Or does there have to be racist intent for it to be racist law that is unconstitutional? And also, even then, the intentionality is like hard to prove if it is intentional or not. Which is why, like, the instances where like voter ID laws get fucking yeeted by state Supreme Courts, oftentimes are as a consequence of like personal negligence from the dude who is like designing them, because he ends up like writing in an email like, yeah, I'm doing this because I don't want blacks to vote. I am doing these voter ID laws so we stop black people from voting. And then they like send the email and then they fucking die. And then their daughter finds the hard drive years later. You know what I mean? It's literally like, that's the only way that they get fucking clapped up. That's a real story, by the way. I'm not even kidding. That's a real fucking story. Ridiculous the need to prove intent in a law. It discriminates. You fucking answer. I can't tell if you're, I don't understand what you're saying. I don't know what happened. The only judge I recognize is Mike Judge, King of the Hill, best anime ever. I tell you what.
Mr. Yang?
I agree with Professor Tolson. Voter ID laws can be racist.
Okay, that's
other
two.
contexts.
Mr. Science?
There are some voter ID laws that are racially discriminatory in intent.
How about
See, he's doing it. Oh, that's in the video. They're doing it already. That is the defense. It's not that like voter ID laws are racist. We've gone beyond it. Like, everyone agrees they are. Okay? But like, did we intend it to be racist? Ooh, oh well, like, oopsie, what an accident that it's racist. Like, the outcomes are disproportionately targeting black and brown and poor communities. I don't know. It's just like, what about the intent? Can you prove the intent? And then you can always relegate to the, well, did he really say he's a Nazi defense? Remember, like, old heads know. Wow, so you think Latinos can't get IDs? I never understand this argument. Only undocumented can't get it. Why should non-citizens be able to vote? First of all, non-citizens can't vote. There are no documented instances of like anything beyond marginal fucking irregularities that are not even significant enough to change the outcome of any sort of election where like a fucking undocumented person has been able to vote. You are lying. That has never happened. It's not a real thing. Shut the fuck up. That's number one. Two, it's not saying that like, oh, what about Latinos that can't get IDs? Like, no, that's not the problem. The problem is it makes it as hard as fucking possible. And it's not just like, oh, you need identification to be able to go out and vote. I love that like everyone hyper focuses on this singular aspect that like, oh, well, why can't people just like get a fucking ID? That's not the end all be all of voter ID laws, you dumb fuck. Signature matching, for example, seems like on its face a totally innocuous, normal thing to have. Why shouldn't we do signature matching? Well, it's because Republican state legislatures and Republican secretaries of state that are supposedly in charge of the sanctity of these fucking elections will then go and yeet out like thousands of fucking black ballots because, oh, their signatures aren't not matched, because it's not a fucking real science. It's totally subjective. Okay? That's why. Let's not act like, you know, these actual improvements that are designed to protect the integrity of our elections are truly there to protect the integrity of our elections, especially because there is no fucking attack on the integrity of our elections. The only attack on the integrity of our elections do not come from people individually going out and voting illegally, but actually from the systemic changes that these dumbass Republicans are advocating for in the form of voter ID and voter suppression. That is a necessity because apparently there's a big boogeyman out there where Democrats keep winning these elections. That's it. That's it. So I'm sick and tired of having these fucking dumbass arguments about like, oh, well, black people can't get an ID. It's like, first of all, it is rather difficult if you have never fucking gotten an ID, if you don't drive a car. It is rather difficult if you're poor and you're constantly fucking working to go out and get an identification, get a piece of ID. But that's not where it ends. People that have IDs still get purged from the fucking voter ballots. Okay? They still get purged from the voter ballots and not from the voter rolls. And then also on top of that, you have to pay for a fucking ID. Also on top of that, even if you get the ID, sometimes, or at least, and there is information for this, in more instances, black and brown people, okay, or specifically poor people, end up getting their fucking IDs from the DMV where they write on a piece of paper, okay? They write their name out on a piece of paper versus white people and wealthier people, more often than not, end up using the internet to be able to put their documentation in. That kind of marginal difference leads to like a gigantic percentage of people having false information on their identification, and false information in the form of like having one letter mismatch, or false information in the form of having like a fucking dash in the wrong side. All of these marginal things are looked at by these demon Republicans. Brian Kemp specifically in the state of Georgia did this against Stacey Abrams. Like literally, as he was the Secretary of State, purged thousands of people from fucking voter rolls by finding out that black people were more likely to have gotten a fucking ID by going to the going to the DMV, okay, and writing out their names, which led to more marginal differences in the way that their names came out in the system. Yeah, and when the DMV spells your name wrong, it's fucking difficult as process. And not only that, but voter suppression is not just that. They literally shut down DMVs in black and brown neighborhoods before they implement these kinds of policies, on purpose, by the way, after figuring out what percentage of Democratic voters versus Republican voters are actually, without a fucking ID. It functionally is a poll tax when you have to pay $80 to get a license. So now you have to pay to fucking get a license so you can go and literally vote. Before the decision on Arizona election laws this summer, the Voting Rights Act protected voting rights by looking at disparate racial impact. The Supreme Court, the Alito opinion, ruled this summer that now people challenging the law have to show that the intent was racist. Yeah. So it's no longer that you're just simply stating that like this has racially disparate outcomes. It does not matter if the intention is fucking racist or not. Ultimately, the outcomes are racist, and it is like making it harder for black people to vote. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. You have to prove intent, that they're like intentionally passing this for racist for racist reasons. Are you saying that the DMV spells people's names wrong, or people don't know how to spell their own names? Okay. I'm sick and tired of having idiotic fucking Americans, not comprehend anything outside of like individuals, okay? When I tell you something as all encompassing as a systemic problem, please stop reducing it to like, well, are there individual bad actors in the DMV that are writing the names incorrectly on purpose? Or are there individuals that are too stupid to write their names correctly? No. This is evidence that bears itself out in data. Something as marginal a difference as like writing your fucking name out on a piece of paper versus plugging it in on a computer ends up with gigantic differences in different in different groups of people in different socioeconomic conditions. They found that poor people go to the DMV and write it on a piece of paper. And when you write it on a piece of paper, whether it's on the process of you writing it or whether it's in the process of them plugging that information into the computer, somewhere along the line, there are problems, okay? It's that simple. And something as simple as that leads to percentage differences that allow, when you add in an additional clause to like purge people off the fucking voter rolls because their name is not a one-to-one match, that human error that happens to black people more frequently in places like, Georgia, leads to thousands of people getting kicked off the voter rolls despite the fact that they want to fucking vote. Okay? And not only that, but also, like, it literally goes back to, not just like people writing on a fucking piece of paper, but even like, what do you call it? Even like names that have unconventional spellings, like black people or Latino people. Like they don't have the same kind of like conventional spelling that most white people are used to. Okay? And it impacts white people too, of course. But these fucking people literally go in. Yeah, like Hasan versus Hasan, exactly. And Republicans look at this. They look at this data and they go through it and they fucking figure out what these discrepancies are so they can weaponize it against black people. My last name has a hyphen in it and they always fuck it up. Yep, exactly. And it's the same process with like fucking voter suppression in the form of signature matching. So they always do this from Kagan's dissent, addressing this argument. And what is mere inconvenience or usual burden anyway? The drafters of the Voting Rights Act understood that social and historical conditions including disparities in education, wealth, and employment often affect opportunities to vote, Kagan wrote. What does not prevent one citizen from casting a vote might prevent another. You can use my name. It's a Monte. It gets misspelled all the time. I was almost not able to vote because my name was incorrect the first time I was ever legally able to vote. Anyway, so those exact match laws are weaponized against black people, brown people, and poor people in general because they just don't want them to fucking vote. Like, because they end up voting for the Democrats. And there are still idiots in here that are like, what are you saying? Black people can't get a fucking license, dude? Ah, fucking owned, dude. Like, sick, dude. You really fucking owned me, okay? You really did. Like, the Texas Republican legislature recently passed a fucking provision that allows them to override the Democratic election results if they choose to do so. And you're over here being like, dude, come on, dude. Voter ID laws, how are they fucking racist? It's too late. Like, it's already too late.
Voter ID laws can be racist.
Okay, that's
another
two.
context.
Mr. Science?
There are some voter ID laws that are racially discriminatory in intent.
How about in practice? In intent, fine, you say there's some racist with a malevolent intent lurking in the back of their mind. But let's just talk about as a...
Like, explain to me why you can't have 24-hour drop-off ballot boxes and universal mail-in ballots in the United States of America. Explain to me why Election Day is not a fucking national holiday, a federal holiday. You can't. Those are literally direct reasons to stop people that are working class from fucking voting. Okay? That's it. That is the only reason why we don't have a fucking federal holiday for voting. And also that we can't have universal mail-in ballots and 24-hour drop-off boxes. Things that Texans had for the first time ever that immediately got fucking purged because the Texas Republican legislature recognized the dangers that it presented, that more people could possibly fucking vote. And that's terrifying. That's literally terrifying. Donald Trump personally admitted in yet another instance of honesty that, like, if we're able to do, if we're able to allow universal mail-in ballots, Republicans will never win again. He said that. He literally said that.
Practical matter. When I go to vote, they ask me for my ID. I pull out my ID, I show it to them, I vote. Is that racist?
If the law that requires you to do that was motivated by racially discriminatory intent
What about the
under
effect?
our
Set aside
Constitution.
intent. Set aside intent. I'm asking about the effect.
Yes, in effect, I
Okay,
think that
Ms.
there are
Reardon.
discriminatory effects from a number of voter ID laws.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Reardon.
I'm going to
It's so stupid. He's like, I'm going to refuse to see the point that you're trying to make here. Okay. I don't want to see the point you're making here. Tell me, is that racist? How is that racist? How can it be racist in intent but not in practice? Yeah, that's the funny part. It's like, I love that he reworked that argument in the wrong side. Normally, you're supposed to make the argument that, like, in practice, it's racist, but in its intent, it's not. Okay. And he actually fucking worked it. He worked it the wrong way, where he's like, "Oh, so the intent is racist. Well, what about in practice?" It's like, well, if an action is intentionally racist, then yeah, in the practice of it will be racist as well. You fucking idiot. Elections on weekends during the whole day and mail-in are commonplace things in literally every democratic country. I know. Well, we are not a democratic country. We're a republic, okay? Shut the fuck up. We're not a democracy. It's like, just shut up. Like, you know what that fucking means. Small d democracy is literally what we have, okay? Or what we're supposed to have.